Thank you so much. I can't believe you are all here. Thank you. Have you ever made the statement, if I would have known then what I know now, ... Yes? Well, me too. And I'm thankful to be here to share some of those moments in my life with you. My name's Estelle Nester, and I'm the wife of Keith Nester. Now, everybody here knows Keith, right? I mean, if you don't, he's the former pastor who converted to Catholicism a few years back. You know, the one who posted his CEO talk on YouTube and has over 250,000 views. He was on EWTN's Journey Home, and his episode had the #2 highest number of views in 2020. You know who had the #1? Scott Hahn. The most well-known Catholic convert. Well, Keith got to interview Dr. Scott Hahn for his podcast, of course, and when he was done, he gave Keith his personal cell phone number and invited him over to his home. Yep, that's my husband. And here's my side of the story. I was born and raised in Philadelphia. I had a normal upbringing. I lived in a row home with my parents and my brother. I went to Catholic school like most of my friends, and I really loved it. We didn't attend Mass every Sunday. We were what is called Christers. We went to church on Christmas and Easter. I did go to Mass sometimes during religion class. I don't think it was weekly, maybe monthly, I'm not sure. We did learn about the sacraments and such at school, but mostly I just memorized the correct answers so I can get them right on my test. I didn't let the meanings behind the answers soak in. I was a good kid. My parents brought us up with good morals, and I liked following the rules. I didn't really struggle with any major sins, and in fact, my friends used to tease me and tell me someday that I'd probably end up a nun because I was such a goody two-shoes. One time during class, we had Mass and confession. I was in about the 4th grade. As I was in line, I was trying to think of some of my sins. I had to come up with something, and all I was coming up with was, you know, the normal ones, like I was mean to my brother and stuff like that. Well, I was talking about it with a friend while we were in line, and she told me that it was a sin to take communion if we didn't go to Mass the Sunday before. She didn't know why, and neither did I, but I thought it sounded like a good sin, so I was going to use that in confession. It was true. Well, that was a big mistake. The priest raised his voice at me and he told me, "You don't belong in the Catholic Church." He said that I didn't deserve it and I was wasting my parents' money and that I should just go to the public school across the street. I was horrified because I really was a good kid. I didn't even understand why it was a sin, and instead of explaining it to me, he just totally lost it. I was so upset, and I decided that from now on, if I had a sin to confess, there was no way I was gonna risk being yelled at by a priest, and I would just go straight to Jesus myself. And I did just that. I had a decent prayer life. I didn't go to Mass, but I did believe in God, and I was a good person, and that was good enough for me. It seemed to work for all those around me. I continued on to Catholic high school. It was an all-girls school that I absolutely loved. The first day of religion class, however, we had to take a test based on our opinions about the Catholic faith, and I totally failed. I mean, how do you fail a test where the answers are supposed to be your opinions? I didn't think I would fail it, but I was Catholic, but I guess I was a pretty horrible one. I didn't understand anything. I mean, I couldn't even pass that test. I couldn't wait to finish high school so I could pursue my dream of becoming a model, an actress, a singer, and a photographer. I planned to move to New York City as soon as I could. I started saving my money and worked 3 jobs after high school. One of my jobs was working as a waitress at the Olive Garden in Philadelphia. On my first day there, I remember being in the back and seeing this incredibly handsome guy with dark hair. He was a waiter there. He was smiling and talking with his hands and stuff, and he looked super confident and sure of himself. My first thought was, wow, he's hot. My second thought was, yikes, he looks like an arrogant jerk. He's totally not my type. Well, he came over and he introduced himself and he said, "Hi, my name's Keith. It's nice to meet you." And he didn't seem like a jerk at all. In fact, the more I worked with him, the more I realized that he was pretty much the nicest person I've ever met. We were talking one day and he told me that he was from Iowa. Well, now I know why he was so nice. Everybody from Iowa must be that nice. He told me he was a Christian and asked if I wanted to go to church with him. And I said, yes, of course. After all, I was a Christian too. I did go to Catholic school for 12 years. The church was completely different from anything I've ever experienced before. It was packed. Everybody seemed happy and excited to be there. People brought their own Bibles. They sang loudly during music, and some even raised their hands in prayer. I never saw anything like that before. When it was time for the teaching, the pastor came out in a Hawaiian shirt. He sat down on a stool and he preached through the Bible verse by verse. He was in 1 Peter chapter 2, where it says, "Therefore, rid yourselves of all malice, all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow to your salvation, now that you have tasted that the Lord is good." The sermon was about 45 minutes long, and I was soaking up every word. I loved the way he was explaining the Bible to me. I couldn't wait to go back and learn the rest of the Bible. Keith bought me my very own Bible so I could read it at home too. I chose a pinkish rose-colored cover because it matched my nail polish that day. I couldn't wait to tell my parents about this church and what I had experienced. When I got home, I told my parents, and they were not happy. It totally caught me off guard. I was raised to believe in God, so why wouldn't my parents be happy that I wanted to learn about him and start living my life differently? There is no way my Catholic daughter is going to that church. It's a cult and you are being brainwashed, I was told repeatedly. I was devastated that they weren't happy, but it didn't stop me at all. I still wanted to learn everything that I could. I felt like this is what I was missing my whole life. I was craving that spiritual milk and I was changing. I lost a lot of friends and I had people mad at me for a very long time, saying that I walked away from the faith. But I didn't look at it like that because I was still a Christian. Keith and I attended church together whenever we could. I still wanted to move to New York, and he was moving to Davenport, Iowa in a few weeks to work at a church as a youth pastor, but we really enjoyed spending time together. We were just friends, but I did feel a connection to him, and I was thankful that he asked me to go to church. He moved and I was sad. My plan was to continue to go to that church after he left. And I tried, but I didn't have a driver's license, and it was difficult to ask his friends to come pick me up and take me home. I lived like 40 minutes from church. I took public transportation sometimes, but it gets dangerous at night, and there was no way my parents were going to take me. Things weren't getting any better with my parents. They were still very against me going to this church. And even though I was learning what it meant to live a Christian life, I wasn't acting very Christian towards them. I thought that giving my life to Jesus was the right thing to do, but it's a lot harder than it seems, and everything in my life seemed to be falling apart. I didn't know what to do. I called Keith from a payphone in the Olive Garden lobby one night after work. I was telling him how things were going, and he said, "Why don't you just move to Iowa?" He said he'd asked the senior pastor of the church if I could move in with him and his family. And I thought that sounded like a perfect plan. I could help him with the youth group. and I could continue to learn about God myself. I was starting to think of Keith as more than a friend, and I thought that we probably had a future together. So I decided to move to Iowa. I left my family in a harsh way and changed everything about my life. If I would have known then what I know now. This is a moment I wish I would have handled differently. This was the summer of 1995, and I was 19 years old. My moving to Iowa didn't go well with my family, as you can imagine. I mean, seriously, can you imagine getting a call from your daughter from a payphone and hearing her say, "Hello, I just want to let you know that I moved halfway across the country." They had no way to reach me. There were no cell phones back then. And if one of my kids did this, I wouldn't know what to do. Keith and my relationship progressed quickly, and I can't imagine what my parents were thinking. It's too hard to talk about the details, but I will just tell you that all is well now with my family. They love Keith, and in fact, I think they like him a little better than they like me. We got married in '96, and everything was great. Keith loved his job at the church. The senior pastor, Craig and Lisa's family, became our second family. The people of the church took great care of us, and we were loving life. 13 months after we got married, we welcomed our beautiful daughter, Devin. Wow. She was an angel. 21 months after that, our son Jesse was born, and he was the sweetest, most cuddly little guy. The kids were perfect, so obedient and sweet. And I have to say, I was thinking that Keith and I had this parenting thing down. I mean, we knew what we were doing for sure. I mean, our kids were amazing little people. Well, 21 months later, we welcomed our son Drew, and we don't know what hit us. Surely this one isn't mine. I mean, my kids are supposed to be super happy and sweet, and he was grouchy from his first breath. We learned that we had no idea how to parent this child. I read every parenting book I could, and we even took parenting classes. Sometimes I felt so helpless. I remember talking to my mother-in-law about this one day, and she told me, "He is going to grow up to be your sweetest child, I can tell." And I thought to myself, there is no way. But I have to say, she was right. All three of them are great, but Drew turned out to be an absolute sweetheart. I loved being a pastor's family. I was so happy and so proud. Being the pastor's family was our identity, and I was great with it. I thought to myself, well, my friends were almost right. I mean, being a pastor's wife is kind of like being a nun. Not perfect, but I still gave up a normal life for the Lord. Now, not everything was unicorns and rainbows. Following God is not always easy. Working in ministry for a living can get a little hairy at times. You're supposed to put God first, family second, and work third. Well, that can become a challenge when serving God is also your full-time job. The two become one, and before long, the family falls lower and lower on the priority list. As a wife, it's hard to say anything because your husband is serving God, and what wife doesn't want that? Pastors and pastors' wives sacrifice a lot, just as priests and religious. They are doing their best to be good examples to teach the faith. And the devil wants to destroy them. He wants to destroy their families, and really all families. Don't let that happen. We should all be praying for our families, and we should all be praying for our church leaders. I have a lot of respect and compassion for church leaders. There are a lot of blessings that come from this life, but there's also difficulty too, and our marriage was starting to struggle. If I would have known then what I know now. There was a period of about a year or so that I wasn't even sure if our marriage was going to make it. Because Keith was in the position he was in, our issues kind of became public. And it was hard to walk around town thinking that everybody knew that we were having marital trouble. A lot of people avoided me, and I felt very alone. I'm sure they just didn't know what to say. I mean, I totally understand. But it was embarrassing, and I remember wishing that we got to keep our issues private like others normally do. It was challenging. We both decided that we wanted to do everything we could do to keep our family together. Keith took a break from being a pastor, and that's a very long story and can be a whole other talk, really. We moved our family to Wilton, Iowa, and worked at a boys' ranch that was also a dairy farm. Moving away from Iowa, where I felt like everybody knew my private life, was good for me. It was good to be out of the spotlight. Looking back, I highly doubt everybody in Davenport knew what was going on. But when we were there going through it, that's what it felt like to me. I needed a break from feeling like all eyes were on us. We learned a lot about doing a different kind of ministry at the boys' ranch. We learned how to help the boys that were living there, and we also learned how to milk cows twice a day, every day, even during tornado warnings. And that's another long story. But I'm sure it was pretty comical seeing a city girl from Philly try to milk cows and do farm work. During this time, we also went to weekly counseling, and we had a handful of friends that walked through this difficult time with us. And I am extremely grateful for those friends. We were working hard on getting our relationship back on track, focused on God again. Not focusing on God for a job, but relying on Him for our very life. We were building our family back up, and things were becoming better than ever. We started a small photography business, and Keith eventually got hired part-time at 2 churches while we were there. I was nervous about falling into the same God is also work trap, but I was confident in all the work that we did to change, heal, and prioritize our marriage. And I felt great about where we were. I loved the churches that we were at, and the people were very loving and caring. We renewed our vows in 2010 to celebrate our new and healthy marriage. I loved getting married again, because when you first get married, you have no idea what to expect. You think things like perfect, well-dressed kids, white picket fences, and romantic picnics and stuff like that. Well, when we renewed our vows, it was awesome because it was saying, I know this can get messy, and it's going to get difficult, and it's not always going to be pretty, but I still choose you to share this life together. It was awesome, and I loved that day. People who knew of our marriage struggles in the past sought us out to ask for help with their marriages. We worked with them and saw miracles happen in some of those relationships. Some couples whose relationships seemed beyond repair are thriving today, and I am so happy that they stuck it out and put their marriages in God's hands. Had our issues been kept a private matter, we wouldn't have been asked to help them. It was a great blessing for us to use our struggles to help other couples. Things just kept getting better and better. One day, out of the blue, Keith got a call from a pastor who's a friend of ours at Marian Methodist Church here in town. He wanted Keith to interview for a full-time position at the church. Keith did not want to do it. We were so happy and so content with where we were, and we didn't want anything to mess it up. Well, long story short, he interviewed, and here we are. We loved the church. Pastor Mike is awesome, and the senior pastor and his family from the first church that we worked at in Davenport, Craig and Lisa, they also lived in that area now, so that was a huge bonus for us. Our little photography business started to grow, and we were doing great. We were still the pastor's family, we were still serving God, and life was still good. After about 6 or so years of serving in this church, Keith comes home one day and he sits me down and he says, I think God's calling me to quit my job and convert to Catholicism. Now, if this was a play, this would be a perfect time for an intermission. So Keith says his line, you see my blank stare, and the lights go out. The crowd comes back, lights come up, you see Keith and I standing there, and I say, what? Did you just say you were thinking about converting to Catholicism? Where did that even come from? I listened to his feelings about this. We talked about it almost every day for months and months. I watched him wrestle with it for a long time. And what I learned was that this was actually about a 20-year journey for him. He never said anything all those years ago to me because he didn't want to freak me out. He was reading every book he could get his hands on, and what he was learning was that without the authority of the church, we will always be wrestling with questions of what the Christian faith really is. He listened to every Scott Hahn talk he could. He even made us listen to Scott Hahn talks on our road trip to California. California's a long drive. And I love Scott Hahn talks, but that was brutal, Keith. It was cool to see his excitement, but personally, I was uninterested. I didn't think it was going to happen anyway, so I didn't get too worked up. There was no way he was going to convert to the dull and lifeless religion of my upbringing. He's got way too much energy and passion. I was starting to notice that he lit up when he spoke about the possibility of converting. As time went on, I started to freak out inside. I had so many thoughts running through my head. Doesn't God know what I went through with my family to become Protestant? Was all of that for nothing? Could our family go through another huge transformation? What would the kids do? They're all adults, and they grew up in churches that they love, where people love them. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't make them convert. Does God want us divided in our own home? What would I do? I wasn't being called back to Catholicism. I don't know anything about it. There were things I needed to work through. Hello, confession. I didn't ever want to do that again. And oh my gosh, he is talking about it more and more. I think this might happen. Well, the day came where Keith went to a Steve Ray talk with a great friend of ours, Greg, who not only helped Keith with all the Catholicism stuff, but Greg's also one of those handful of friends that was there for us when we were going through our marriage troubles. Keith came home from that talk and he said, that's it. I'm doing this. I'm converting. I don't know what we're going to do for money, but I know that God is calling me to this, so we're going to figure it out. You can hear his side of the story about this amazing day on his YouTube channel. We refer to it now as Steve Ray Day. He mentions it in his conversion talk. If you go to his YouTube channel, don't worry, you won't miss it. It's the one with 270,000 views. My heart was pumping fast. I was freaking out inside. I was so incredibly proud of Keith. I knew he was searching for direction from God, and I loved that he was trusting God with this. That being said, for me, it's super easy to trust God when you feel like he's calling you to a job or something that's going to offer some security. It's completely different when you feel like God's calling you away from your main source of income with nothing to replace it. We had no idea what to do, and the only thing we could do was give this whole situation over to God and trust that it would work out. I told Keith that I was so proud of him and that everything would be okay. Keith met a priest in town and wanted me to meet him too. So Father Chris, Keith, and I went out to lunch one afternoon. Father was asking me a lot of questions about my upbringing in the church. I told him that I grew up in Philadelphia and I had gone to Catholic school, but we did not attend Mass regularly. He asked what I planned to do now. And I told him I had a decision to make. I had to decide between staying at a church that I loved and attending with my kids, or having the kids be on their own and following Keith to the Catholic Church, even though I didn't feel called to it myself. But that ultimately, I decided to follow Keith to the Catholic Church. I'm embarrassed to say this here, but my going back to the Catholic Church had nothing to do with the Catholic Church and had all to do with me trying to be a good example for my kids and by showing them that the wife follows her husband when the husband is doing his best to follow God. I asked if I was going to have to take any classes or what the process would be for me. And he said, "Oh, it's super easy. All you have to do is go to confession." And now I kind of feel bad about this part, but here's what I said. "Fine, I'll do that. But here's the deal. I will not confess being a Protestant who's trying to follow the Bible or being a pastor's family as a sin. I am not sorry for any of that." And Father just laughed and he said something like, "Well, you're a feisty one, aren't you?" And I will treasure that lunch for a long time because I felt comfortable enough with Father Chris to tell him how I really felt about things. I didn't feel like he was just looking for the perfect little holy answers. He was just looking for the truth. We later learned that before anything was made official that we'd have to get married in the Catholic Church. So we got married again. And I said to Keith on the way out, I was like, "Listen, this is the last time I'm marrying you." And a few weeks after that, we had our last day at the Methodist Church and Keith came into the Catholic Church. I hired Keith to work full-time at the photography studio. I wasn't sure if we'd get enough work to handle 2 decent salaries, but we were having fun and we were getting by for now. It was exciting to see Keith so excited about his conversion. As for me, I had a harder time than I thought I would. I cried at every Mass for a good 3 months. I cried for multiple reasons, some of which I don't have time to talk about here, but it has to do with some major differences in Protestant and Catholic beliefs. Some choices were made that are painful to me and would not have been made had we been Catholic the whole time. And that's a talk for another time as well. Man, I'm up to like 4 follow-up talks here. I do want to say this though. If you are Catholic in a serious relationship with a non-Catholic, please know that there might be some differences in your faith that could be hard to deal with later. Talk about the major differences now. It's not just, do you prefer a contemporary service or a traditional service? There's way more to it than that. So seriously, pray about that. Anyway, I mostly cried at Mass because I was sad and confused. I was sad that I put my parents and brother through what I put them through, only to be right back where I started. I cried because it was extremely painful to me that the 5 of us were no longer attending church together as a family. We were all divided, and I was confused as to why God would call us to that. Our little family had gone to church together every Sunday for the past 21 years. We never missed. But here we were, all scattered. It was very difficult. One day during one of my crying fits at Mass, I was praying, and I was saying, "God, I know you don't want it to be like this. I know you don't want us divided, and I know you don't want me crying at Mass, throwing an internal fit." And he was like, "You are right. So how about you open your eyes to what's going on here and start paying attention instead of feeling sorry for yourself?" So I decided to give that a try. Our friends Craig and Lisa, who have a church here in Cedar Rapids, asked Keith if he would fill in as their worship leader until they found someone who could do it full time. He agreed, and I sang with him, and it really helped me to transition. We really enjoyed that church and the people there, and it felt good for me to do something familiar with people that were like our second family. Each week, I prayed about what songs to sing at Craig and Lisa's church. One week in particular, I felt like God was saying to sing the hymns, Holy, 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 All Creatures of Our God and King, and Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord, which is a contemporary Christian song. Pastor Craig's sermon was all about trusting God. It really hit me because I was struggling with the fact that Keith was a few months into his conversion, money was getting low, we had like 2 months worth of bills left. I didn't care if we were poor as long as we could pay our bills and feed the family. But I was upset that Keith's talents and passion didn't seem to be being used in the Catholic Church at all. I just wanted to see God use Keith in his new calling. And I thought that since God called him to quit his job and that he obeyed, that there would be an incredible ministry waiting for him that would just explode. I mean, God must have something in store for him, right? Well, what is it? I was in tears during that whole sermon that I could hardly sing the last song, Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord. We went to Mass that night. Father Tony was the officiant. When we got there, the song Holy, Holy, Holy was being played on the organ. I looked over at Keith and I was like, well, that's cool, we just sang that this morning. The entrance song was All Creatures of Our God and King. I leaned over to Keith and I said, if they play Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord, I'm gonna freak out. And we kind of chuckled because it's a contemporary song. And I checked the hymn numbers just in case we weren't gonna sing that song. So Father Tony got up to give his homily, which was awesome as always. And in the middle of it, he just stops preaching. And he starts singing a cappella. And the words were, Open my eyes, Lord, I want to see your face. Open my eyes, Lord, help me to see. I instantly started sobbing, and I knew that this was a God moment that I would never forget. I felt the Holy Spirit with me, and I felt like that was the moment that I converted back to the Catholic Church. I'm not done. Have you guys ever had a moment like that? It's amazing. So I started paying attention to Mass, and I was blown away. Did you guys know that it's jam-packed full of scripture? I remember back in the day feeling like Mass was boring. Well, it will be boring if you don't take time to learn about what's going on. It is not boring at all if you pay attention. I started learning and asking a lot of questions about why we do some of the things we do. I asked about simple things like incense. I mean, it seems a little dramatic, doesn't it? Well, it's used as a symbol of our prayers rising to heaven. How cool. There were other reasons too, but that's the one that stuck with me. I asked, why do we dip our hands in the water when we're coming in? It's to remind us of our baptism. I love that. I'm not sure if I just wasn't taught or if I didn't pay attention, but it was very exciting to learn these new things. My questions did get a little deeper as time went on. Have you heard of adoration? Adoration of the Blessed Sacrament is a time to worship the one true God in the person of Jesus Christ, who's truly present in the Eucharist. People sign up for 1-hour shifts. I remember feeling like that would be a long time to sit there and pray. However, when you think about Jesus saying to his disciples during the agony in the garden, could you not spend 1 hour with me? It helps you to realize that an hour is not that long. And I never want to feel like Jesus is saying that to me. There's something about walking in and focusing on Jesus and praying in silence. The time usually flies by. I went to Latin Mass and I absolutely loved it. I mean, I didn't understand anything, but there was something about it that I really loved. I love that Father Aaron has teaching moments before Latin Mass. It's helped me to understand so much more. Friends, if you don't know why we do certain things, ask and learn. It's very exciting and it's very biblical. Don't take any of this for granted. Don't just go through the motions and be lukewarm Catholics. You will miss out. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk so that by it you may grow up to your salvation now that you have tasted that the Lord is good. If I would have known then what I know now. Needless to say, I was becoming more open to the idea of all this. I am not a perfect Catholic, and I feel extremely childlike compared to where Keith and others are around me. I'm still learning, and I have a long way to go, but man, am I excited. I love this church. The people here are wonderful examples of what being Catholic is all about. I love the scripture-filled Mass, the incense, the holy water, the sacraments. I love knowing the meanings behind all those things. I love the devotions, and of course, the Eucharist. Had I known more about the Eucharist before, I don't think I would have walked away so easily. Now, I still thought that by this time, Keith would have been doing something in Catholic ministry. We were about 8 months into his conversion. I thought that all kinds of doors would have been opened up for him by now. He was loving everything, but I was getting frustrated in his defense that his talents weren't being used to teach people. Our friend Greg, remember Greg, he's the one from Keith's Steve Ray Day. He asked us if we'd like to go to Medjugorje with him and a group of people. I was super excited to go. We got the dates and we realized that we would be there for Keith's 1-year anniversary of coming into the Catholic Church. How cool. Maybe we haven't heard from God about our future because of all the busyness of being at home. Kids, work, housework. Surely God will talk to us there and tell us the plan for our life. The trip was amazing. You can truly feel God there. People go there because Our Lady has allegedly been appearing there since 1981 and still continues today. I say allegedly because the church has not yet pronounced its authenticity of the apparitions. Our Lady's purpose for coming to earth is to guide each one of us back to her Son. I love that everything about Mary draws us closer to Jesus. I loved being on Apparition Hill where Mary appeared to the kids for the first time, and Cross Mountain where there are stations of the cross on the way so you can reflect on them as you walk up to the cross. People from all over the world gather. At Mass, you hear the responses in every language you can think of. I imagine that's what heaven is like. One of the days, Greg led our group in the rosary as we were walking up Cross Mountain, and it was incredible. And even though the whole trip was very worshipful and a powerful experience, I didn't really feel like God was speaking to me directly about our future. I was hoping he would, and I was getting impatient and frustrated towards the end of the trip. I didn't voice any of these feelings to anybody, not even Keith. I felt the feelings were a little selfish, and I didn't want anybody to think I was missing out on all the amazing things that were happening there. I was able to notice and appreciate all the good, but I still did have these strong feelings and expectations. On the last day, we went to every service we could. Masses, rosary services, adoration, everything. While we were at adoration, I was praying, God, please talk to me. And then I felt God say, go to confession. God, no, talk to me directly. It's our last night here, God. Please tell me exactly what to do. And he said, go to confession. I argued with God, and I said, do you know how many people are in line for confession? I'll never get in. Sometimes there are around 50 priests hearing confessions in many different languages, and the lines were long. The outside area where that took place was swarming with people every time we walked by. And I said, sorry, God, you should have told me this earlier in the week and I would have gone. But I don't want to miss out on anything awesome that could happen on our last night. Looking back, I'm pretty sure God rolled his eyes at me. It was getting late, and when adoration concluded, we stayed seated and we waited for our friends from the group. I was looking over at the confession line and I was trying to decide what to do. One of our friends came up to us from the group. They looked at me and they said one word, pizza? I jumped up and I said, yes, let's go. We had a great time. And after I stuffed my face with half a pizza, I started thinking that I could have messed this up. Maybe I should have at least tried to go to confession and listen to God. I think he was talking to me and I disobeyed. And now what am I going to do? It might be too late. It's our last night. I was starting to feel pretty guilty. I asked Greg, what do you think my chances are for getting into confession tonight? And he looked at his watch and he said, it's after 9 o'clock. The chances of finding a priest still there, especially an English-speaking priest, are not good. Darn. Well, I think I'm going to walk over and at least try. So Keith and I walked over about a block to where the outdoor confessions took place, and I was feeling pretty hopeless as we were heading there. It was looking pretty empty and dark. We still continued to walk, even though it wasn't looking good for me. As we turned the corner, in the distance, we saw one priest sitting there, and he had a sign next to him that said, English. I couldn't believe it. As I approached, he said, I've been waiting for you. I wasn't freaked out at all because I felt God's peace. I sat down and I started my confession and I said, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been a few months since my last confession. However, I should tell you, I have major issues with confession, and all of my other confessions were done half-heartedly out of obligation. But I feel like God told me to come here, so I want to consider this my first confession. And then I spilled my guts, and it took a long time. I didn't tell him that I was feeling like I haven't heard from God while we were there. I didn't really feel like that was a sin. And if this was my first confession, I had to make sure all the big stuff was taken care of. And I was crying. And even though I felt like I confessed my sins to Jesus on my own throughout the years, there was something about saying them out loud to a priest. It was hard to get the words out sometimes. And when I was finally done, he said, your sins are forgiven. And it felt great. He said, I can truly tell that you're sorry for your sins, but that's not the only reason you're here. You are here because it's your last night in Medjugorje. And I thought to myself, I didn't tell him that. He continued, you have been frustrated with God for a long time, and you have been wanting him to speak to you on this trip, and you feel like he has not. Well, here's his message to you. Be patient. Keep doing what you're doing and trust in me. And I started crying, and then I started laughing because I was so filled with joy. I jumped up and I hugged him and I thanked him a million times. I said, thank you for waiting for me, and that I was so sorry that I went to go eat pizza. I mean, seriously, have you ever jumped up and hugged your priest after confession and continue to jump while you hugged him? I'm sure it was quite the scene. Thankfully, the place was empty. It was so awesome, and I was so excited. I couldn't wait to tell Keith what he said to me. Keith and I walked around for what seemed like hours talking about the amazing trip and our lives as future Catholic. The next day, we were in the bus heading towards the airport, and I was video recording the sun out the window with my phone. The sun is a big deal there, and I just wanted to capture it one last time. As I was recording, the people in the bus were praying out loud. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Keith take out his phone and start texting. I'm pretty sure I shot him a nasty look. I looked at him, and he leaned over to me, and he said, "God just told me to write a book." And he showed me his phone, and it said, "The Convert's Guide to Roman Catholicism, your first year in the church." There was a reason we were there on Keith's 1-year conversion anniversary. There was a reason that God didn't have Keith do too much during his first year. He was just experiencing being Catholic. I love watching that video that I shot on the bus because it was shot at the exact moment that God was telling Keith what to do. Nothing exciting happens in the video, but just knowing what's happening behind the scenes is super cool to me. I will treasure that forever. Things have been amazing since we've been back. Keith spent that winter writing the book. It's been released on Amazon and is doing very well. The last time I looked, he had about 100 5-star reviews. Since the shutdown, Keith's been live streaming a live rosary every day, 5 o'clock Central on YouTube. Yes, every day for over a year now. At last count, there were over 70 countries represented. The people who pray with us every day have become our little online community. It's now referred to as the Rosary Crew. Feel free to join in anytime. He has people from all over the world contacting him to tell him that his ministry has helped them in so many different ways. It's amazing. God is answering my prayers, and Keith is being used in an incredible way. Oftentimes we ask God to speak to us, but we already have an idea of what we want to hear. Isn't it crazy that confession, the very thing that turned me away from the church, is the exact thing that Jesus used to bring me back wholeheartedly? Is there anything that you're asking God to speak to you about, but you're unwilling to hear what he has to say? Is there something in your life pulling you away from church? Do you need to give a confession that's not half-hearted? Do you need to reach out to somebody and ask for forgiveness? Do you need to give your life to Jesus and start living differently? What is he saying to you? How different would your life be if you would just listen? Don't wait. Open your eyes and ears and listen to what he's saying. I wish we would have listened sooner. This year we sold the photography studio and we used the money to buy an RV. We decided that when Keith is booked for a speaking engagement, that we would drive the RV and stop in cities along the way to pray with people from the Rosary Crew. We had our first Rosary Crew road trip, and it was amazing. There's a video about it on Keith's YouTube channel. Check it out. I think you'll like it. Our kids are still attending Protestant churches. Our daughter graduated from UNI and will be an elementary school teacher. She also leads worship at a church in town and is amazing. I cry every time I hear her sing to the Lord. Our boys are in the military, and they play guitar, bass, and drums at other local churches sometimes, and we are so proud of them. I trust that God will continue to use them and speak to their hearts. We look forward to meeting more people in the future and giving talks whenever asked. I'm so thankful for a husband that hungers to know and listen to God. I'm thankful for so many things. My amazing kids, family, friends, the Rosary crew, for this church, and believe it or not, I am thankful for the sacrament of confession. And I never thought I would say that. If I would have known then what I know now. Thank you.